Next, Derek Roy went from the Buffalo Sabres to the Dallas Stars for Steve Ott and Adam Pardy. Now, I don't know if they made the Ribeiro trade knowing that Derek Roy was on the table. I know the trade was kind of far apart, so I'm not going to speculate on that. But you know what? This is a great trade for both teams, especially for Dallas if Derek Roy works out, all right? Because in Derek Roy, Dallas possibly gets a 29-year-old 70-point scorer. All right, possibly. He's 29 years old, so he's in his prime. He's got another, good 2-3 years before he starts to go over his prime into the post-prime years, basically. All right, and he's only 1 year off of no, sorry. I think it was like 2 years. I forget if it was 2 or 3 years. Derek Roy had an 80-point season, all right? So he has had it in him. Now, he's had one off year, only having 17 goals and 44 points in 80 games this year. So, I mean, it was a bad year for Derek Roy. It was still a good year for points, for an above-average player. 44 points is not that bad. But Derek Roy, if you do it once, you have that expectation. And Derek Roy has the potential to be close to a point-a-game player. I'm not saying, he's an automatic 80-point guy every season, but he's at least a 65, 70-point guy every year if he's playing on his game, all right? He's done it before, he can do it again, and he's only 29 years old. So if he works out to be a 65, 70-point guy, it's a great trade for Dallas. Now, Buffalo, I think the reason Buffalo did this was to get a little bit more gritty, a little bit more toughness. Buffalo now has their Rob Ray back again in Steve Ott, all right? Basically somebody who can stand up for Ryan Miller. They're not going to let that Lucic and Jordan Tutu crap happen to their star goalie ever again, all right? They got to get a little bit tougher there in Buffalo and not let things like that happen to their star players. I think it was a great trade for both teams. Both teams needed it. But if Derek Roy works out to be a 65, 70-point guy, I got to give the nod to the Dallas Stars, all right? The next trade, we're getting into the big ones now. Jordan Staal. Jordan Staal traded from the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Carolina Hurricanes for the first-round pick in the 2012 draft, which was like 8th overall, I think. That turned out to be Derek Pouliot, Brendan Sutter, and Brian Dumoulin, all right? Now, I think Carolina gave up a lot for this deal because Eric Staal was going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the upcoming year, and they were saying that he was just going to sign in Carolina next year. Remember, he turned down that huge 10-year, $60 million contract or whatever it was that Pittsburgh offered him before they traded him. So he didn't want to re-sign long-term in Pittsburgh. He had the chance. I don't know what if he wanted to go play number 1, number 2, or if he just wanted to play with Eric. But they were saying that he could have definitely signed in Carolina. So I guess Carolina didn't want to wait the year. I guess they feel like they could maybe be a cup contender this year. But if it was only the year they had to wait, they gave up a little bit too much because that Derek Pouliot guy, the guy that got like 8th or 7th overall, good defenseman of the future. Don't know too much about him, but they were saying a good offensive defenseman of the future. Brandon Sutter, he kind of fits into that perfect third-line position that Jordan Staal left in Pittsburgh. Not as talented as Jordan Staal, but Jordan Staal is talented enough to be a first- or second-line center. All right, he doesn't need to be on the third line. Brendan Sutter fits in perfectly behind Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. He's not going to have any pressure to get any points. He just has to make sure he plays good defensively. That's the job of the third-line center. He doesn't have to get a 60-point season. And let Crosby and Malkin get the points. So I think it was a great trade for Pittsburgh. Jordan Staal, he wasn't going to stay there his whole career. It had to be 2 of the 3. Crosby, Malkin, and Staal. And you know what? Malkin and Crosby, Crosby's Crosby in the season that Malkin had last year, you had to go with them. So I think it was a great trade for Pittsburgh to fill up that third-line spot without losing Staal, getting a kid defenseman of the future, and Brian Dumoulin, I don't know anything about. All right, so I think it was a great trade for Pittsburgh. Next, JVR, James Van Riemsdyk from the Philadelphia Flyers to the Toronto Maple Leafs in return for Luke Schenn. Straight up hockey trade, no draft picks, no prospects, 1-for-1, defenseman for forward. I think it was a great trade for both teams. Both teams get what they want. Philly get a nice, young, big defenseman with his best years still ahead of him. All right, Leaf fans, I'm sure there's some Leaf fans who said Luke Schenn sucked. I don't see it that way. Luke Schenn played on a young team who didn't know how to play good defensively. The team, not Luke Schenn. He's what, 23, 24, something like that. Defensemen don't get to their best years till they're like 27, 28 years old. All right, and he's still like 4 years away from that. So he already leads the league in hits, or he's at the top every year. All right, and he's not a like, he is a defensive defenseman. He's not going to get you 50-point seasons. But the last 2 years he had more than 20 points. In his first year he almost had 20 points. All right. So as a defensive defenseman who's big, who goes for body checks, who will lead the league in body checks or be close to leading the league in body checks, he's still going to give you 20 or more points. All right. So he can play first or second line minutes, not power play minutes. You should have better guys on the power play than that. But that's what I mean. He's a stay-at-home defensive defenseman, big, young, and he also gets more than 20 points a year. So he's a good defenseman for Philly, especially with Chris Pronger problems, all right? And for Toronto, they get JVR. And Toronto, it fills up another piece of their top six puzzle. They get bigger up front. Now JVR, he was expected to have arrived by now, right? The second overall pick behind Patrick Kane back in 2007. Second round pick, you expect 3 or 4 years in to be getting you really good seasons. All right. His first year, I think he only had like 35 points. His second year, he had 40 points. Or something like that, or maybe first year 35 or 40, and then the second year 45, something along those lines. All right, and then this year he was injured. But the thing I like about JVR, he's still young. His best years are still ahead of him. All right, same thing as Shen. He's like 23 or 24. All right, he won't be at his best until he's 26, 27. All right, so his best years are still ahead of him, and he hasn't taken a back step yet. His first year, again, 30, 35 points, I forget. His second year, 40, 45, a 5-point increase. Not that much, but a 5-point increase. This year, he only played like 42 games, but in those 42 games, he was on pace to have like a 45 or 50-point year. All right, so another 5-point increase. So in his first 3 years, he's increased 5 points every single year. Now, I like to look at patterns, right? Now, if he's 24 or 23 years old, by the time he's 27, say that's another 5 points in the next 3 years. All right, there's another 15 points. So are you telling me that by the time he's 27, he's going to be getting 65, 60 points a year? I'm fine with that. If James Van Riemsdyk can turn into a 26, 27-year-old 60-point guy, I'm fine with that, all right? So that's what I mean about Shen and JVR. I think a lot of people will say that they're both busts, but they're both young enough that they still have the great potential. I don't think that they're franchise players, either one of them, but they're great support players that will no doubtedly help your team now and the future. So I think it was a great trade for both teams, but we're just going to have to see, 5, 10 years down the road to see who really won this trade. You're not going to be able to tell 1 or 2 years in. They're both way too young. All right? And last but not least, this video's been going on for a while, but you know what? That's why I'm doing 2 of them. Last but not least, the trade that just came through, Rick Nash from the Columbus Blue Jackets along with Steven Delisle and a conditional 2013 first-round pick for sent to the Rangers for Brendan Dubinsky, Artem Anisimov, Tim Erickson, and a 2013 first-round pick. My goodness gracious. Blockbuster trade of the offseason so far. And you know what? This is a big steal for the New York Rangers, all right? I mean, good God. Are you telling me you couldn't have gotten more back for Rick Nash? Jesus. I mean, Glenn Sather is just licking his chops. Look, he's smoking that cigar now. He's lighting that cigar for sure, man. It's a big steal for the New York Rangers. With the Rangers, you know what you're getting with Rick Nash. You know what you're trading for. You know what they're getting with Rick Nash? They're getting at least 30 goals and at least 30 assists. If he's healthy, you're getting 30 goals in the regular season, 30 assists in the regular season. You don't know what you're getting in the playoffs. I think he's only had 1 stint in the playoffs with the Jackets, and they got swept against the Red Wings, I think. So come playoff time, we don't know how he's going to act. You're hoping that with that salary, he's going to contribute. But you're getting at least 30 goals and 30 assists. And now put him alongside of Brad Richards possibly, or Stepan, or Stepan, or Kreider. They're young guys that are coming up. A lot more talented players than what they have in Columbus. Maybe he gets you now 40 goals, 40 assists, maybe 50 goals for the first time. But you're getting 30 and 30 with Rick Nash at the minimum. All right, healthy Nash, 30 and 30. Now, the lack of secondary offense really hurt the Rangers in the playoffs last year. When you think of the Rangers, you think of Gaborik and Richards, and you think offensive juggernaut, but they're really not that deep. They really don't, even though they came second in the NHL last year, first in the East. they really weren't a goal-scoring juggernaut. It was their defense and Henrik Lundqvist that got them that far. And they're actually going to be missing, what's his name, Gabrick, at the start of the season this year due to injury. So they need Rick Nash for the start of the season so that they don't get off to a bad start. And then once they have those three guys, Rick Nash, Brad Richards, Marian Gabrick, the emergence of Chris Kreider. All right, there's top four right there. So they're starting to get deeper. Stepan is coming up as well. They lost Dubinsky and Anisimov, but they kept all of their young defensemen together. They kept Stepan and Kreider, who to me were the better prospects to get. This is why I think the Rangers really had a huge steal here. I thought either Kreider, Stepan, Delzato, McDonough, or there's another defenseman. There was another defenseman in there. I think Girardi or, I forget that fourth guy. I thought one of those guys were going to go. But to get rid of Anisimov, Eriksson, who hasn't really played a game for them yet. I know he's young, really hasn't played a game. A first-round pick who you got to expect is going to be, it's not going to be in top 15 because you got to expect they're going to have another good season, the Rangers. And Dubinsky, who really, he's a good top, bottom six guy. I think the Rangers really stole Rick Nash from the Columbus Blue Jackets. And they really didn't give up any part of their future. They gave up a little bit of their depth players right now, but if you're getting Rick Nash back, I mean, hell, do it. He's still only 27, 28 years old. You can build around him now. And like in 1 year, the Rangers signed Brad Richards and they traded for Rick Nash. I mean, goddamn, screw the Rangers, all right? So there you go, boys. There's my questions with Superbman. It's been a long one, I know. I wanted to get all the trades from the NHL since the draft done. All right, so go ahead, ask me more questions, but the next one's going to be on all the free agency signings, the main ones anyways, and then we'll get back into the questions with Superbman. But remember, keep them not that personal, keep them sports-related, all right, so that I can get you guys in on the conversation, that they're not quick yes-no answers, all right, boys? So there you go. For Johnny Superbman, the great Domski, take it easy, boys, and we'll see you next time.